Right. Our next speaker is Xiaoliang or Ted.
Yes.
Who is currently a postdoctoral researcher at UCL. Ken focuses on exploring the capabilities of large language models in predicting neuroscience outcomes. Together with Bradley Love, they have laid the groundwork for BrainGPT, a generative large language models for scientific literature. BrainGPT aims to enable researchers to input study designs as prompts with the vision of generating data patterns reflecting the synthesis of existing scientific research. These efforts mark significant initial strides towards realizing the full potential of BrainGPT in aiding neuroscience research. Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right, so I'm just gonna present the latest results from our lab and also part of the braingpt.org. So if you search this keyword neuroscience in Google Scholar, and then if you add a filter to be like since 2020, you still get over 100,000 hits. Actually, oh, why is it not? It's not going to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so actually people have found that there has been an almost exponential growth of scientific literature since 1980. And this is causing problems because scientists are being overwhelmed by the pace of how the literature grows, and then they have limited capacity to digest and to integrate the information into their research in time. And a negative consequence of that is scientific progress is slowed and disruptive findings could go unnoticed. So we thought in this work, can large language models be one solution to mitigate this problem and to accelerate scientific discovery? We thought that because these models are being trained on vast amounts of text, including scientific articles, and they're excellent at mixing information from noisy signals at a very large scale. And also because these models are generative models of their training data, so essentially they're doing this forward-looking operation. They're trying to predict what is the most likely word given all the previous words that it has been trained on using the transformer architecture. More specifically, we ask, can such a powerful generative model capture the underlying patterns of neuroscience, which, as we all know, is a very, very large field, mixed with signals from all kinds of sub-areas. And these are just like 5 main areas that you can find on Journal of Neuroscience. And let's just think about what makes a scientist good, right? So after years of training, scientists, they learn to integrate information from their literature, from going to conferences, from running their experiments. They gradually build up this intuition to predict novel outcomes from their study, or they're very good at suggesting promising experiments, among potentially a combinatorial amount of possible experiments they could run. But they really have very limited bandwidth compared to large language models, which have unparalleled processing capacity. So if large language models can indeed capture the underlying pattern of neuroscience, then that could be really helpful. So how can we verify this? How do we know for sure that LLMs, they can predict experiment results and to push the boundary of what's already been known? Before I get into that, I just need to clear out the definition between what is a backward-looking operation and a forward-looking operation. So for a backward-looking operation, you're trying to retrieve some known facts from the past. You learn this historical lesson about this very famous speech, and you were later tested about when was that speech delivered, right? But for forward-looking operation, you're trying to predict who is going to win. For example, here, a table tennis game based on what you have already known about these two players, about their previous matchups, etc. You're trying to essentially predict a novel outcome of a future event. For backward-looking operation is very useful, and then it's been well evaluated. For example, when you're asking models to do summarization, or you're asking models to do question answering, it's performing some kind of backward-looking operation by retrieving what is already being learned and from its weights. There are many, many good benchmarks out there that evaluate can large language models answer medical questions or perform some kind of multiple choice questions on many, many different subjects. But how to evaluate forward-looking, and this is what we're trying to solve in this particular study, where we present the BrainBench benchmarks, trying to predict neuroscience results. And specifically, we focus on publication. We're using the abstract of publication articles in neuroscience, and we utilize their particular pattern where when you write abstract, you normally start with the background of the study. You talk about the big picture of the problem, and then you state what the methods that you're going to use and the kind of experiments that you're going to run, and then you state what kind of findings that you got from running those experiments. So we utilize this particular structure. Specifically, we keep the background and the method section the same, but we introduce this like altered finding. So the original finding on the left-hand side of the study shows that emotion recognition centers on ventral and medial parts of the prefrontal cortex, and we introduce this altered version that says emotion recognition centers on dorsal and lateral parts of the prefrontal cortex. So our co-authors of the study, they're like neuroscientists from different fields introduced these kind of alternative findings, and they were instructed to make sure that the overall logical coherence of the narrative is the same, but it's only like the finding itself is contradicting the study or the background. So we put the brain bench data to test both human experts that we recruited online as well as large language models. So the way we evaluate human experts is basically to ask them which version of the abstract that you think is more scientifically correct. And we ask them to rate the confidence and their relative expertise on that particular subject. So this is a interface that the participants were shown, and they need to click on one of these choices in these double square brackets to indicate that they prefer one finding over the alternative. And the way we evaluate large language models are slightly different, but we basically present both abstracts separately to large language models, and we compute a perplexity score out of each abstract. So perplexity measures how unlikely a model finds a piece of text. So you can say that basically a lower perplexity score means that the model finds a version of the finding less surprising compared to the alternative, and we take that as the model choice. And we took the absolute difference between the two perplexities as the confidence of the model. Yes, so we have the complete picture of brain bench that we source this. So we sourced our test cases from these 5 major areas based on the Journal of Neuroscience, and all the articles were published in 2023. And we test them on both neuroscientists as well as LLMs. And yeah, so it was really shocking to me that like overall we tested 15 LLMs from 4 different families of varying sizes, and they all outperformed human experts by a very large margin. And just there are so many things to unpack here, but I just want to point out, for example, the Galactica series, it's a relatively old model that still performed very strongly compared to the newer ones. And then the other thing is these bars with the slashes, those are the chat or the instruct versions of these LLMs that have been further optimized to be able to engage in natural language conversation or to follow human instructions. So it seems like there's a consistent, so they're consistently underperforming their base model counterparts. So this is kind of indicating that whether natural language is sort of inhibiting the model's ability to discern whether a finding is more correct or not. And just to break down the results a little bit more, so we look at the performance across the 5 fields that we considered, and basically all the large language models outperform human experts on all 5 areas of neuroscience. And when I look at the result, obviously one question that I get asked is because these large these models that have been trained on massive text, could it be that the model has already seen that particular abstract and then memorizes it? So we took this approach from the literature that computes a ratio of a piece of text using the zlib and the PBL. So zlib is a text compression algorithm. And basically, a high score of zlib means that the algorithm is having a very hard time trying to compress that piece of text. So the zlib score of a scientific abstract could be relatively high because there's not much redundancy in it. Whereas for the complexity score, it just like I said, it is how unlikely a model finds a piece of text. So if an abstract has been memorized by the model, then we should observe a relatively high zlib complexity ratio. But as we see that really there is no indication of any memorization at all, we took the 3 biggest models out of the 15 models that we evaluated because we thought, because they're huge and then they should be most capable of memorizing their training data. Let's focus on, for example, the Galactica model here because it has a very clear training cutoff of 2022. But you can see some of these archive papers or bioarchive papers that have been published before the training cutoff have really no distribution difference compared to those have come before after the training cutoff that are not part of the Galactica training set. And we also overlay the brain bench abstract and just to see that really they're all kind of cluttered in one space that you really don't see any sign of memorization. And just for fun, we planted a Easter egg for you guys that just the Gettysburg address has a very low complexity score, but a relatively high zlib score. Just means that because this very famous speech has been on internet and then must have been trained on a model many times, then you start to see some kind of sign of memorization, but this is generally not the case for the scientific abstracts that we've used. So what could be the basis for this superhuman performance? And because is it really that the models have learned to integrate contextual information, or is it because these changes that experts introduce causes some kind of fluency disruption that pick up by LLMs? So we conducted this analysis where we removed the background of the methods from the abstracts. We only feed in the results into the LLMs. And specifically, we split the results into these individual sentences where each sentence has one finding and then one alternative finding. And we follow the exact same evaluation procedure as before, but only using these individual sentences to compute the complexities for both of them and let the model to make a judgment. And once we remove the model's access to the background and the methods, you see a very substantial drop in terms of performance. And this is indicating that the models are really capable of utilizing the background and the overall context to derive at a correct answer. Just a few more slides here. So this is showing that LLMs are calibrated in a way that similar to human experts. So on the x-axis here is the confidence of the models, and then you can see, and then the y-axis are the accuracy. So the more confident the models are, the more likely they're going to be correct, which is in a way similar to human experts on the upper left corner there. So we thought it's important that the model should be able to adapt to the ever-growing literature. And we took a pre-trained large language model and we're trying to augment it with neuroscience results from the last 20 years using this parameter efficient fine-tuning approach called LoRa, which we were able to further fine-tune this pre-trained model, but giving it with more neuroscience knowledge, and we call it Brain GPT as the name of the model. So with very cost-efficient training and just using like a very considerably fewer data compared to how these pre-trained LLMs are being trained, we observe a significant improvement on their accuracy on the brain bench data set. So this is quite promising that you can actually to be able to update your model with relatively low cost. I just want to thank my great collaborators who devoted months to create many of these wonderful test cases, and some of them are sitting here today. So thank you.
I have a lot of privileged access here.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the great talk. Do you think these trained networks could also generate new scientific hypotheses? And if so, do we still need neuroscientists?
I think neuroscientists will find very useful I mean definitely I think that's definitely the goal of the whole BrainGPT project is eventually we'll be able to prompt these models with ideas and then they generate hypotheses for us, say, oh, this is probably more promising and this is gonna cost you less money, something like that, because some of the experiments are really hard, expensive to run. And based on like the model's general understanding of the field, they can propose something that is more promising than scientists can think of, but we're getting there.
Not a replacement though, right?
And not definitely no replacement because you have to be able to use these models and then you have to make the final call that oops.
Oh, hey, really enjoyed your talk. It was very cool. I had one question. So like in making the comparison between the human experts and the LLM models and the different flavors of those, have you considered, or what do you think would make sense for like a third competitor model, a model of the human expert trained on the human expert data? So in a sense, it kind of comes back to the old Robin Dawes, Paul Neal type of work, where you can show that you can outperform an expert by building a model of them. I mean, you're sort of trying to extract their signal, but reducing their variance. I imagine, it would outperform the human experts, but probably not do as well as LLMs. But I'm just kind of thinking out loud if that would kind of add a different layer of interpretation to those kind of results.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. But how do you train such a expert model over the experts?
Can the human machine teaming?
Oh shit, yes. Yeah. Yeah, so it's actually something that's not included in the current study, but we did have some primary results showing that we can pair a human expert with a LLM, and this like ensemble model does outperform a ensemble of models or ensemble of human experts, but this is not conclusive result yet, so we didn't include it, but yeah.
Yeah, and that would make a lot of sense from like almost like a wisdom of crowds or like model aggregation perspective. That makes a lot of sense to me, but I'm thinking more like you have a human, you can build simple models. I mean, the old stuff is linear regression, but you can imagine fitting a more sophisticated type of model just to each individual human expert, building models of them that will likely outperform the humans. But then like trying to interpret that additional boost that you get from the LLM and the ensemble, it might reflect more substantive information or what the LLM is actually able to kind of process through. It's just a thought.
Totally.
Yeah, but thank you. It's a cool thought.
Thanks, really cool talk. I was wondering, following up on the Dean's question, if you wanted to train a model or to create a model that will propose new cool experiments or new ideas to test, how would you train it?
You're saying how do we train this generation process? I guess you could at least as
Yeah, because I think what he said in response to the lead is this is where this project is eventually going, if I understand it correctly. So I was wondering, how do you change the training objective? Because it seems like right now the model is good at recognizing if the results match with the introduction. But I think that might also reflect something in the way that we write papers, because usually we set up the introduction in a way that then the results make sense, which might not totally 100% reflect the scientific process that actually went into those findings in all cases. And so I wonder, how can you modify the training objective to really make the model, produce new things?
I think one idea is it's probably to sample the model to generate alternative hypotheses, and then you use another set of models to evaluate whether those hypotheses, which one of them is more likely. I mean, this could be one way of exploring this like a space of all the hypotheses and to decide which one then you should go with. Yeah.
Thanks, super interesting. So, you know, I'm a neuroscientist, but I'm not an expert on 99% of neuroscience, right? So I'm wondering whether the right test is to test people on exactly what their expertise is. Because it seems like the brain GPT is like a super expert in everything.
So we did ask people to rate their expertise when they submit their answers, and we did actually. So this is actually not showing up here, but so I filtered, for example, like the top 20% people have the top 20% self-reported expertise on those different test cases, and there was only like a 3% improvement of this expert line. So I think that is indicating that you could obviously hire like people that are more like absolute experts in their domain, but my guess is they still wouldn't perform as well as the large language models.
Okay, so for every single abstract, I would rate an expertise on that topic. Is that what you're saying?
They're rating their expertise on that particular abstract.
Yeah, relating to what was said earlier, could it make neuroscience more conservative if we try to use like language models which have a massive pre-training data and I try to like propose hypothesis based on that data? Could that in the end make the science more conservative and less creative?
I think it might be the opposite, because the fact that the models are so good at predicting what's possible has shown that really there's so many sort of almost redundant signals in the past that allow the model to derive at the correct answer. So maybe after you train these models on massive scientific articles, then they produce hypotheses that human experts have not thought about before, or just basically trying to push the experts out of their sort of comfort zone and try to think of something that they didn't know was possible because they couldn't digest all the scientific literature around them and from other sub-areas of neuroscience. But I don't know, and this is my take on it.
Thank you for the interesting talk. I'm just going to quickly ask if you can pass me the microphone. So do you find any systematic errors in which the human experts and the LLMs correlate, or do you find something that is that is unique to the papers that the humans are then wrong in? Can you define those things?
Yeah, so I don't have a figure here, but it's in the paper so I did look at whether they're making systematic errors. The correlation across models are much stronger compared to models versus human experts. But I don't have the numbers up on top of my head, but I can show you the paper later if you're interested. There's a figure for that, yes.
Discussion where you can ask questions to all the students. So that's the time, or any of the other students. But it is quite specific for them.
Okay.
Hi.
Come each other. All right,
That's fine. That's I was interested in the extent to which it might feed into it that you had experts involved in coming up with the alternatives. So meaning, are experts good at deceiving other experts because they know plausible alternative patterns that would come up? So are there other ways of generating alternatives that might generate something?
Yeah, exactly. So it's also in the paper that we actually use GPT-4 to generate alternative findings, and they're generally easier compared to the ones that are generated by our human experts. And also, but it's something that's really tricky to do, because when I look at the test cases created by GPT-4, they're in ways very different from human experts as well, because it seems like GPT-4 having trouble sort of swapping brain regions. They're very good at coming up with, like, say, one brain region leads to this enhanced effect in another. There's something that the GPT-4 can do, but I think like they need more sort of neuroscience knowledge to be able to compete with the kind of level of difficulty in terms of that.
All right, thank you so much to all our speakers. Before you all leave, I'd like to invite